that.
Can you hold it portrait? Hold it portrait from there. Portrait, like up and down. Hold the device in portrait. Yeah, make it vertical. Make it vertical. Now you see my name. It says John Watson. Click on that. Tap my name. Tap my name. Tap my name. Is there a little one that says Segedin? Click on that. Click on that. Click on that. Okay. Did it open up a video?
We'll be starting in a couple minutes. These stragglers that we're waiting for. Okay, I guess we're ready to begin. So I think, as the poet Robert Burns once said, the best laid plans of mice and men soon go awry. And if we ever forgot that, we're reminded today with 50,000 runners and 2 million spectators. And we do appreciate everyone braving the marathon and the kill zone, hell zone, or whatever our president is calling Chicago. And we know it took a lot of bravery to show up today, so we really appreciate that. Let's see, a teeny bit of business. One of our remembrances was going to be from El Arno. She's in San Diego, hopefully streaming our video, or we'll watch it later. Her part will be read by my sister-in-law, Carolyn Garrett. So, I'm not going to introduce everybody. I'm just going to welcome you here, and we will get started with some music. So, we have Jamie O'Reilly, Nia O'Reilly-Amandez, and Paul Hernandez to sing Michael Smith's The Dutchman. They're singing a different song first, I'm sorry. As I said, best laid plans of mice and men.
Hello, everyone. Michael Smith wrote many wonderful songs, and this one he wrote for the show that Leo's work was featured in. It's one of the songs he wrote that Leo also loved, and in particular at this time, it seems appropriate to sing it with my daughter and my brother-in-law who directed the show at Victory Gardens.
I grew up with the smell of paint and turpentine in my nostrils. The sound of a typewriter would put me to sleep at night. We were surrounded by my dad's paintings. Pretty much every room in the house had his paintings in them. Years later, we would joke that my folks built the addition to the house so that they could have more wall space. In my formative years, Dad was in the studio painting these large canvases full of various body parts, guts, and viscera. Pretty powerful stuff. While my friends had psychedelic blacklight posters by Peter Bax, in their bedrooms I had a picture of hanging men hanging on the wall. Of course, I took all of this for granted. I thought it was pretty cool. It was a great treat to go to an art museum with Dad. Some of you might have had that good fortune to have done that. Visiting the Prado with him in 1983 and seeing the Goyas and the Grecos and Velasquez's with him was a life-changing experience. By the way, it was while traveling with our folks throughout Spain and Portugal that I first started drinking martinis with Dad, a profound and bonding ritual that continued until late last year. Later, when Dad and I visited New York, we would be sure to go to the Met and the Frick, where we would visit his old friends, the Vermeers and Rembrandts. In 1996, Carolyn and I joined Dad, Mom, Aunt Ruth, and Uncle Gil for the Vermeer show at the National Gallery in Washington, D.C. More recently, in 2022, we saw the Cezanne show at the Art Institute, literally just as Dora was arriving in Aix-en-Provence, Cezanne country, for her year abroad. Dad had a long, productive life, but he knew that there was no way he could have accomplished what he did on his own. Behind every great artist, there are many who helped make it happen, and I'm sure he would want to thank them all. Of course, there are too many to mention here, but he would want to thank his mother, Bessie, who arranged for art classes and museum visits, supplied him with art materials, time and space to work, entered him in exhibitions. When he was in the Army, she talked the selection jury into accepting him in the Art and Vicinity show at the Art Institute after the submission deadline had already passed. He appreciated his father, Boris, Ben, as people called him, who encouraged him to pursue his art as long as he could support himself and his family. He would want to thank his sister Ruth, who is probably his greatest supporter, and her late husband Gil, his dear friend. He'd thank his aunts Hannah and Mary, who bought him art books. He'd also want to thank his fellow artists and colleagues, Tom Cavanaugh, who invited him to Booth Bay Harbor in Maine, where he briefly lived in an artist colony, a pivotal experience that stayed with him for the rest of his life. Also, the Yokums, Harry Boris, and Victor Perlmutter. It was Perlmutter who convinced Dad that he had what it took to be an artist. He'd want to thank Mary Schulman, who helped him when he was artistically blocked, prompting one of the most productive and radical periods of his career. Dad would be sure to thank Shelley Burke, Les Klug, Harold Berlinger, Russ Roller, Barry White, Ellie Arno, the Collins, the Hirsches, the Winnecks, Byron Roach, Michael Smith, Jamie O'Reilly, Keith Bringy, gallerists and collectors, and so many others. Dad especially would want to thank his late wife Jan, his guiding light who gave him a family and reminded him that he was an artist. And in 1987, she convinced him that it was time to quit teaching and pursue his true calling. Dad would want to thank his son Paul, who continues to find buyers for his work and walls for his paintings, and has published several books, which, by the way, are still available. See Paul for more info. He appreciated his caregivers, Rudy and William, who created an environment where he could comfortably work, and who helped gesso and fix his panels, put paint on his palette when he could no longer make out colors, and sometimes finish bricks when he was no longer able to see the details. He appreciated his dear friend Mitzi, who gave him a new lease on life and who encouraged him to keep working even when his health became a major obstacle. I could go on. Over these last several years, Dad dreaded becoming dependent, and while letting others take care of his needs was in many ways a great relief, the lack of independence was a source of great frustration. He had good days and bad, but despite all the challenges of his work ethic, his habit of art prohibited him from quitting. He always returned to the drawing board. His constant refrains were, "I'm still here, I'm still working, and do it while you can." As the world closed in around him, as his senses, all 5 of them, failed him, he developed a great fear of disappearing, of becoming a non-entity, especially before he was gone. Dad has less to fear than most. We all eventually disappear. Some disappear faster than others, but Dad's left quite a legacy. His body of work outlives his body. But he wouldn't want to be remembered for being an old artist. He wants to be remembered for his life's work and the way he and his art and his teachings have influenced and will continue to influence others. On that score, he doesn't have anything to worry about. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Is that better? All right. For better or worse, I'm Bob Freed, and I am a cousin by marriage to Leo. And I was honored that the 2 boys asked me to actually speak today. I first got to know Leopold Segedin, this tall, gangly, odd-looking man, really just a collection of pipe cleaners of various lengths, not in the crucial points. When Teddy and I settled in Chicago, Teddy's wife and I settled in Chicago after our experience in Israel. Not long after we met, Leo and I began jogging in the afternoon along the lakeshore by the northwestern campus. It's still my favorite haunt in the entire area, with its arresting architecture looming over a vast body of water under skies that are equally impressive on bright and sunny days or on cloudy and atmospheric ones. Those afternoons as we jogged were among the most satisfying experiences I've had in the Chicago area. Aided by the dramatic backdrop, there was nothing that we didn't discuss. Politics and obligation, ethics and morality, love and death, religion and the absence of religion, aesthetics and vulgarity in an age of impropriety. Leo's mind ranged widely and extended far beyond his inestimable skill with the brush. Serendipitously, it was just about this time, which would have been in the early 1980s, that Leo, in earnest, entered into a new creative period, one that I consider his richest. In it, he largely returned to his West Side origins. However, the passage of time had deepened his appreciation of memory and of the effects of life's inevitable ravages on all of us. If much of Leo's earlier work owed at least something stylistically to the social realisms of artists like Ben Shahn, this last era contained many respectful bows to the contemplative, eloquent world depicted by Edward Hopper, one of my favorite American artists. A Segedin picture hanging in our living room is a good illustration. The perspective, which has similarities to a fair amount of Hopper's work as well, is from the vantage point of someone riding on a Chicago elevated train
and peering semi-invasively into a West Side apartment building. It's a private moment captured for all the world to see. As important as the viewer's perspective may be, one cannot ignore the content of what is transpiring beyond the window panes of the apartment. Several men in an unfurnished room are engaged in frenetic activity. What are they doing? Are they fighting? Are they transported by paroxysms of religious fervor? Are they dancing? Leo leaves it to us to decide, as he should. I don't need to tell you that throughout his 32 years at NEIU, Northeastern, Leo was an untiring inspiration to those who learned their craft from him and learned about art and art history as well. Back in the day, no student who hadn't taken Leo's art and society course at the university really had the right to consider his or her higher education experience complete. In a gentle yet insistent way, Leo prodded his enrollees to view the aesthetic world in new and different ways. Several years ago, his son Paul told me just one reason among countless others why he and Ben, his brother, adored their mother and father as much as they did. They were the only white people the two boys knew who moved to the suburbs, in this case Evanston, to find black people and not to flee from them. In so many ways, Leo and Jan, his beloved wife, lived their principles. From the outset, Leo displayed his talent. I remember appearing with him at one of his early West Side-based street scene paintings and admiring its balanced composition, its skillful use of colors, and its overall high-quality technique. I said it had authority, and he enthusiastically agreed. Permit a brief digression. Considerably before North American men so commonly sported with facial shrubbery, Leo allowed his whiskers to flourish. That may seem like a minor life change, but I recall his telling me that he kept his facial hair partly because his sons greatly valued their father's symbolic nonconformity. My beard is important to them, he said to me, because it differentiated him from most of the other dads who showed up at parent-teacher night. Add to this, if you will, another brief point of departure. When our daughter Cynthia came to us from South Korea, Leo, Jan, and Paul joined the three of us, Teddy, Jonathan, and me, to journey to O'Hare and welcome her to her new home. The experience deeply moved all three Segedins, with Leo noting that he went weak in the knees when Teddy held Cynthia in her arms for the first time. Most of you know that as the years passed, Leo inserted images of himself more and more into his paintings. In many works, seemingly countless Leos would appear, some as a child and some as an old man. Almost all of these pieces were set against the background of the West Side. Oh, those countless bricks, as it used to be, at least in Leo's mind. When interviewers would ask him why he employed so many self-representations in his paintings, he would often joke that he was the cheapest model he could find. Leo himself offered a thought-provoking commentary on this matter in Leopold Segedin, A Habit of Art, a beautifully illustrated book which he collaborated on with Paul. People write memoirs, what they remember, Leo observed. I saw my history in my face. Some people want their portraits to eliminate any signs of time, of change, of age. I felt that by looking at my face, I was really reading my biography. At the risk of engaging in post-mortem psychologizing, I might suggest that Leo was someone who had a strong sense of his value as one of God's, or somebody's, creatures. He may have concluded after serious reflection that, in the words of Rabbi Hillel of antiquity, if I am not for myself, who will be for me? Decades before Teddy and I intersected on a regular basis with Leo and Jan, the two of them had joined a play reading group that met regularly at each family's home. Most of the time, the presenters just read from scripts. On other occasions, they engaged in a bit of non-professional dramaturgy. Sometime in the 1980s, Leo and Jan decided, when their turn to be hosts arrived, that they would present Amadeus, the hit play and subsequent film by Peter Schaffer about the lifelong obsession of Antonio Salieri. As you probably know, he was the official deity's court composer, who fairly quickly became a secondary figure after the emergence of young Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, perhaps the master of all music then and now. In this decidedly homegrown production in Leo and Jan's living room, Teddy's cousin played the toxically envious Salieri. Billy, the son of another playgroup member, tackled the role of Mozart, described by Schaffer/Salieri as an obscene child, quote-unquote, who seemingly tossed off sublime music without even trying. Teddy and I, rare invitees, attended that night's performance. Was it professional? Most assuredly not. But I, for one, was truly affected by the evening's unfoldings. In some counterintuitive way, the production's amateur status admirably served to augment the depth of feeling underlying the play. In a throwaway line, Salieri, in one instance, says patronizingly to the far superior younger composer, "You're coming along quite nicely, Mozart." On the way out the door, I saw Leo/Salieri and Billy/Amadeus in conversation. I interrupted them by stating, "You're coming along quite nicely, Salieri." High praise indeed, and praise that was deeply sincere. However tempting it may be to look for comparisons between Leo and Salieri, I for one reject the notion of parallel personalities. At the end of the work, Salieri, an old man whose music has long been forgotten and who has been relegated to the madhouse, addresses the inmates saying, "Mediocrities everywhere. I absolve you, I absolve you, I absolve you." In no uncertain terms, Leo and his art were far from mediocre. All of us have our talents, some of them hidden and some not. But Leo spent nearly a century perfecting his considerable talent. He defined it, and it defined him. How many of us can say the same? I really miss him.
I guess we'll turn your attention to the screen. Sir? Oh, okay. Okay. I thought you wanted an introduction.
I don't need to.
There are two things that show up a lot in Leo Segedin's paintings: his own face and childhood games.
Well, to me, childhood, from the perspective of an old man, childhood is still part of my life. You know, it's not something I outgrew. It's me playing buck with myself.
Oh, this is you, and you're carrying the other you.
Those are all me, you're all me. And there's me contemplating old age as a young man.
Leo Segedin is a lifelong Chicagoan. He grew up on the West Side, started painting in the late 40s, and from the beginning, he painted the city that he saw around him.
He's a great poet of Chicago. The Chicago that Chicagoans really know, the Chicago of the L stations and the back of 3 flags.
wanted, but I got what I wanted.
When you meet Leo, his interest in games and childhood isn't that surprising. At 86, he is playful, energetic, even impish. But while many of his paintings are about play, I notice that the people are often serious.
It's serious stuff. To me, the games that we played when we were kids were very serious games. When you build an airplane model, you're making something that's important to you. This stands for something in your life. When you put on that tissue paper and you put the glue on it and it shrinks and it works, you look at it, look at that, look what I did. So it's more than just the fun of playing with airplanes.
Well, I didn't like this one.
Jim Buick specializes in Chicago artists. When I asked him to comment on Leo Segedin's work, he took a closer look.
Well, I've known Leo's work for 20, 25 years. I've seen it in a very sort of spotty, random manner. But the opportunity to look at them closely has really raised my estimation of him and his place in the history of Chicago art. This is a significant body of work, and there are many of these works that would hang with authority at the art institute or the MCA or a similar institution.
Leo Segedin says he would welcome greater recognition, of course, but it's never been his reason for doing the work.
I'm not painting for a gallery. I'm not in the market. I'm not producing a commodity. I'm painting because I have something to say. I want to say it.
And he says that some contemporary artists have lost sight of it, and that now anything can be art.
You can take this over here, and it has form, it has shape, it has color, it has light. It's meaningful. It has a function. You can talk about it in a number of different ways. Is that a painting? I mean, I make something to be meaningful. I don't find meanings in objects that already exist. It's what a lot of people are doing today. I think what makes a person human is that he makes things. He destroys things, but he also makes things. He makes things that didn't exist before.
Leo Segedin's paintings are not all about childhood. He's also taken on social issues, including a series of powerful paintings from the 1970s that look at the Holocaust. Even some of his personal memory paintings reflect tougher subjects, like two that he calls a kid. He was originally going to call them a Jew.
Every so often I could walk in and say, on the other side of plastic, what was corporate in those days, and some kid with a costume. And the question always was, are you, let me on the shoulder, turn, roll me around and say, are you a Jew? Anytime somebody challenged your identity, I said, hey kid, there's something frightening about the challenge.
Leo Segedin taught at Northeastern Illinois University from 1955 to 1987. In 1957, he was one of the founders of the first artists cooperative in Chicago, called Exhibit A.
The young artists, I say, don't expect to make a living selling your paintings. There's no way to make a living. We want to raise a family, and I'm no starving artist. I like a good meal, I want my kids to have a good meal, and so teaching was the best way to do it.
Leo's wife, Jan, died in 2005. Leo says that from the beginning, she was unusually open to the idea of life with an artist.
Since she left, part of what I'm doing is Jan would go over my shoulder and say, hey, why are you up here? Get your ass up here. Come on, get to work, get to work.
In recent years, Leo has painted a series he calls Old Man Dancing. The old man, of course, is him.
Dancing is a metaphor for a living. As long as you keep dancing, you're alive.
Are you a dancer?
No. But the idea of dancing, I love, and I think it's great.
You do a lot of self-portraits. Why do you do so many self-portraits?
I'm a cheap man. I don't get a mirror. I'm trying to get my girlfriend to pose for me. She's got a better reluctant, but we're working on it. It's not an ego thing. It's not that I'm trying to blow myself up. It's that I seem to be concerned with the way I feel about things.
The actual work of painting, what's that like for you? Do you enjoy it?
No. It's a pain in the ass, literally. It hurts. I hurt. My hips hurt. I sit long enough, I gotta get up and walk around. It's worse. It's stress. I come down at the end of the day, 4 o'clock, I am drained. I like what I'm doing, but it's It's not living. If I want to pleasure, I think I'd rather sex is great. You know, that's pleasure. That's pleasure. But painting is work.
Okay, how's that? Functioning? Good. When Jerry and I moved to, I'm Alan Teller, by the way. When Jerry and I moved to Monroe Street in Southeast Evanston over 30 years ago, we were told that a painter lived on the block. In our arrogance, we thought, yeah, it's a Sunday painter. You know, maybe puppy dogs or trees or some banal paint by numbers trite work. Then a few weeks later, we received a postcard announcing an opening of a new exhibit. The work was stunning, with bricks and L stations and World War I pilot helmets, clearly detailed work by a serious and accomplished artist. We turned the card over. Of course, it was Leo. I hope we've matured a bit since then. A little background. Leo liked to say that he backed into art, not recognizing that art was to be his life until he was a junior in college. During the Korean War, he taught drafting at the U.S. Army Engineer School in Virginia, and that sense of craft is evident in his work. After the war, he was hired by Northeastern Illinois University, where he taught for the next 32 years, until his beloved wife, Jan, who you've heard about just before, convinced him to focus full-time on his painting. Leo's work is realistic and magical simultaneously, a nod to the role that the past plays in our everyday lives. Whether it's a portrayal of childhood games with all the fears and fun that taking ourselves seriously at any age implies, or the reality of anti-Semitism and not its current disingenuous politicizing, Leo addressed real issues. His more abstract work in the 60s confronted the Vietnam War. His later work addressed the complex reality of aging. I love his Dancing Old Men series. His countless self-portraits are a direct attempt to go beyond the perfection of his bricks or the beauty of his L stations to manipulate time and create visual stories. I like to characterize Leo's sense of time as something malleable. Nothing is linear, past and present merge. It's Einstein, not Newton, on the canvas. And when I say countless, I really mean it. Leo was always working, always thinking. His output is amazing, as was his energy. Leo was going blind, yet he worked up until the last few weeks of his remarkable life. At one point, he couldn't even see the color on the paint tube, and he knew the painting in his head needed red in one specific area. So he asked Rudy, one of his dedicated and wonderful caregivers, to hand it to him. I can't talk about Leo without addressing the subject of martinis. The man lectured on the history of the martini. And for better or worse, he taught me how to both make and drink them. He had one every day and invited the neighbors to join him. Eventually, I often made them for him, and, sorry, Leo, I began to water them down as he aged, to avoid his conking over, which we once witnessed. He still thought they were delicious. We had great discussions about art and life over those martinis. Leo is an inspiration. He provided a model on how an artist could live, being true to their vision, working their ass off, and not expecting much in return other than the self-satisfaction of integrity. There are some people who, when you hear their name, you just smile. And while it's sad that Leo is no longer with us, and I can't drink martinis with him, or my wife Jerry can't make him the chicken paprikash that he loved, it's not really sad. His was a life well lived, an example for the rest of us. We miss you, Leo, and I intend to be a dancing old man for as long as I can.
Hello, I'm Sabrina. I was Leo's great niece, and my grandmother is at home right now, his sister, and I'm speaking for her today and for all of you. When I think of Leo, I have my whole life of memories of him and also the things that he's taught me. So I'll take you through a little story of my life and Leo's life and how we weave together, and then share with you some of the things that I've learned from him. One of my earliest memories is eating Passover dinner at my grandmother's house down in the city, and I remember Leo got to eat more jelly candies than I did, and he was sitting there with us as the kids. But what I really remember is that at the end of the night, he went over to the sofa and he sat and had a long, deep conversation with, I don't remember who, but he's the person who taught me that after the meal, you sit and you talk and you listen and you think. My next big memory comes when I learned to drive. The first place I drove to after I got my driver's license was to see Leo and Jan. We sat and talked for a long time, but I knew with that newfound freedom, the only place I wanted to go was to Evanston to sit with them and spend time together. I remember driving home and thinking, wow, I really made it. I traveled to the place that I wanted to go autonomously to visit my uncle and aunt. And later, when Jan passed just shortly after that time, before she died, she told me that she wanted me to keep an eye out for Leo and make sure that he was okay. And I asked my grandma last night, she said it was okay, I could share that now. But for a long time, I held that as like my personal mission that I had to make sure that Leo was all right. So in college, I decided I needed to study at the Art Institute of Chicago. And there was no way I was moving home with my parents. So I called up Leo and I said, can I live with you? And he had just turned 80, right in there. And he said, yeah, there's a big open house here. It's just me. And if you'd like, you can come in. I've got a bedroom for you. So I went in college and I lived with Leo, and we got up to some shenanigans. He was the one who taught me how to melt butter and maple syrup, and he also told me that the best place to run was down on the Northwestern campus, which I also enjoyed doing while I was there. And going to see him speak and present his essays at the firehouse, and see his friends gather around him there, because just like I was, they hung on his every word and wanted to learn from him, just like me. And he wanted to learn from them. So as I was living there with him, I also got to work up in the attic. So I don't know if you ever got a chance to visit up there, maybe at a house show or just having been in the childhood home of Ben and Paul, but Leo had a beautiful place to paint, and as a kid I thought it was just like a place you go to play. But I was an art student and I was invited to make some work up there in college, which was a very moving experience for me. And I also thought I was very serious and that I knew a lot at that time. And I'll never forget the day that a delivery truck rolled by on the street. And I heard it and I looked out the window. Leo looked out too. And I said, what yellow do you think that is on the delivery truck? It was a DHL truck. And Leo said, oh. I said, do you think it's like a canary yellow? And he started to completely deconstruct the quality and the hue of the truck. He knew exactly how they had built that yellow. And it kind of hit me in that moment, like I didn't know what I had been talking about. And I had a lot to learn up there. And so after that day, just trying to understand color from him in a different way. and that was a really meaningful connection that we had. So now I'm an adult. I have a child, and one of my more recent memories of Leo is bringing my child to Leo's house, and Leo saying, here are all the pencils, here's all the crayons, here's all the paper, go and make art, we'll talk, the grown-ups will talk. And my child is sitting there, and he starts scribbling. He's a little kid, he's scribbling on the paper. And Leo interrupts our conversation, nudges me and says, you know, he's only making marks up and down. He's not moving his hand in any other way. And I thought again, of course, Leo has a way of seeing people and movement and color in a way that I don't. So I worked with my kid, and now he can draw in many directions. And when I brought him back and the same task was presented to him, he also could display, like he can draw a circle now. It's great. I also, in the last couple of years, have had more chances to paint. And finally grew up enough to ask Leo a question, which I asked Leo a lot of questions and have in my life, but I finally was ready to learn from him in a different way, and I just asked him, what brush should I buy for this? And he lit up, and he wanted to tell me everything about the brushes that he had, what brush I needed for my specific task, and how I could mix color to achieve what I wanted to. I'm a potter, I was painting on ceramic work. And anyway, I got to be at an art show recently, and I was standing there looking at my work on the wall, thinking about being a little kid at Byron Moshe's gallery at openings for Leo, and just thinking how glad I am that I got to learn from Leo, and that I take all that learning into the future with me as a parent, as an artist, and as a niece. Thank you.
It's been so enlightening so far. A man with so many levels and layers, including, as has been mentioned, his activism and his incredible appreciation for the human spirit. This song was written in honor of the Spanish Civil War International Brigade volunteers, many of whom were left behind in Spain in unmarked graves. The Spanish Civil War also was the introduction in the 20th century of the modern idea of fascism that many of you in this room and many of those we love never thought we would revisit again in our lifetime. No matter the gathering of people, the faith belief, the agnostic nature of who we are, we all want to bless those that have come before us and thank them for what they've done. And so I chose this song in honor of Leo that we sang as I was introduced for my first time to what we call the progressives of Chicago, the people who were willing to fight in the 60s and the civil rights movement, and to keep their minds open that there are more than one way. So this is for all of them, and for all of you who continue to do and fight a good fight.
We Good afternoon. My name is Keith Ringy. And you know, my admiration of what I've written here, which is a type 5, as they say in stand-up, so, is a repetition of many of the things that have been said, so please bear with me. I first met Leo through Ben and Paul in the 1980s, and I remember well and very clearly Leo and Jan's legendary hospitality and welcoming kindness. I'd like to specifically talk about Leo's life as an artist. Of course, it's intertwined with his life as a teacher, husband, and father. I have a small community-based gallery on the north side of Chicago, opened in 2017. And when I decided to open Rare Nest, Leo was top of mind. And I was really honored and delighted when he allowed me to represent him. But I do need to express my admiration for Leo's previous dealer, Byron Roche, who worked constantly to raise Leo's profile. There should be more gallerists like Byron, ethical, visionary, and kind. So this is how I think of Leo as an artist. He explored 4 major themes or styles in his career and had the courage to shift when his exploration was over. Takes rare courage and commitment. People stick with the style that's successful. He starts with social realism through the 1940s to expressionism in landscapes depicting the shoreline in Booth Bay Harbor. Then intensely honest, courageous political criticism in the late 60s and 70s, finally settling on this kind of magical realism that was really a poem to Chicago. The thing that distinguished Leo, that set him apart from the great majority of contemporary artists, was his superhuman work ethic, his drive and his focus. This drive to work constantly led him to make several thousand evocative, well-crafted images throughout his career. And even with profound vision loss and hearing impairment, his work ethic led him to form images in the last weeks of his life. Images of stairs, which was a constant metaphor for the struggle to work. In the style that dominated the last 4 decades of his career, Leo often included self-portrait and was quoted, "I'm a cheap model." But this is a simplistic dad joke. I believe Leo's self-inclusion illuminates the role of the artist, combining creativity, vision, conceptualization, and individuality to better evoke a universal human experience. Experiences like childhood, play, aging, and the essential role of memory. He produced numerous portraits of himself in the city as one, asking us to witness beauty and loss through his eyes, and to contemplate the nature of our origins, where we come from, and how our sense of place makes us all human. How lost places, your grammar schools, empty lots, train stations, how they remain tangible in our memories. A part of Leo's work described conflict and trauma around difference, what it means to be different in a world that pushes conformity and tribalism. But ultimately in Leo's work, I see the strength of the individual. And of course, these images were also poems to Chicago common brick. Thousands of bricks made from Chicago clay, each one rendered with its own personality, texture, color, and weight. For me, this evokes a solidarity with the folks who built the city. The artist and the bricklayer are brothers of a sort. Chicago has never been an easy place to be an artist. Our second city syndrome is still pronounced in all our venerable institutions. I think this concerned Leo. It continues to frustrate me. But Leo was able to overcome this and apply a laser focus on what mattered, the work. Always the work, and striving for a more evocative composition, suffused with light and texture. When my gallery mounted the first retrospective of his work, I was honestly amazed at the number of former students that contacted us. Some now in their 60s and some from great distances. They wanted to express gratitude and affection for Leo's nurturing, generous teaching and its ongoing impact on their lives. Decades after leaving the teaching field, Leo continued to share his insights in pedagogy, including his periodic talks on art, given well through his 80s. These talks were incredibly well-researched and detailed contemplations on the tenets of Renaissance art, techniques and theories of perspective, and much more. Finally, I think it's important to acknowledge, and I think we should all be grateful, that Leo had the best possible sons and daughter that an artist could ever imagine. Ben, Carolyn, and Paul, throughout their own adulthoods, all of their own responsibilities, were constantly to support Leo's art, publishing books and catalogs, arranging exhibitions, schlepping art everywhere, constantly showing up for each and every event, reception, and talk, and then through Leo's physical decline, seeing to all of his needs, social and physical, with respect and constancy. Thank you, kids. Love you. Leo's work and his memory will be a blessing.
When I was a mere instructor entering the English department in northeastern Illinois, we were all scrunched together in the beehive. We weren't separated by departments. And this one guy from the art department exchanged pleasantries. And then at one point, he made the most important proposition to me that any man or woman ever did. It would last a lifetime. Leo said, "I got nobody to talk to about things. Do you want to come and talk?" And we start going out to lunch, and we talked about this and that and the other. And finally, when we had enough trust and confidence in each other, we started arguing with each other. True friends know they can trust another friend to argue. You can always tell when Leo was arguing, his finger would go up in the air. When the years passed and we'd sit and argue over the dinner table, and Jan would get frightened and worried, and we'd have to assure her, if I could quote my friend William Blake, opposition is true friendship. I'll repeat what I said when I spoke at Leo's retirement. There are two kinds of friends. There are friends who, like primetime television, are entertaining and interesting and keep us occupied till it's time to go to sleep. There are other friends who, like the art and the literature and the music we love, enrich our lives. Leo was such a friend. He enriched my life for a lifetime. A lifetime later, of course, now Leo is invalided in his home, and I would still go to visit him and bring lunch. Can't talk about Leo without food. And even when he was losing his taste, he was still eating it, especially those pastrami sandwiches from Romania. But then after a while, as all his senses and sensibilities began to fade, I stopped going. It was troubling to me, and he was kind of a statue sitting there. I would call Paul and ask him how he's doing, and call Rudy up and how's Leo doing? And then when we said, he'd love to have you over. Okay, so I came back, I brought food. We set the table, we said, Leo, this goes over here, that goes over there. And then the thing I want you to remember, as we sat there, son of a bitch, he was still arguing with me.
Carolyn. I'm Leo's daughter-in-law, Ben's wife. I'm reading a tribute to Leo from Ellie Arna. As Paul mentioned earlier, she lives in California, couldn't be here. So in 1971, this 22-year-old Evanston High School French teacher walks into a figure drawing class at Evanston Art Center. She desperately needs to put charcoal to unloose print before she goes nuts conjugating verbs. A very professorial-looking Leo Segedin sees something in those drawings. He sees my DNA, which had visual artists printed on it. I enrolled at Northeastern Illinois University the next year and soaked up everything I could quickly. Then Leo and 2 other instructors shoved me forward to the School of the Art Institute. Leo kept mentoring, monitoring, and advising me. He and Jan welcomed me into their home and their family and their busy, artful life at 828 Monroe Street. In 1975, we exchanged art. He gave me a big portrait, and I gave him a collection of my lithographs I did for my MFA entitled How to Talk Dirty in Esperanto. Leo's portrait stares down at me in all the places I've lived and reminds me to live and love art every day as my loyal and constant companion. For the next 50 years, Leo continued to guide me through the ether with inspiration, hope, and determination to examine life through art. Even when I got detoured or blocked with life crises, the Leo force will pull me back to try again, to dig deeper, to examine life honestly, and trust the well that is never dry for an artist. When I got stuck, I look at his work in the beautifully published books or read his insightful writings online and wonder what advice he'd give me about value, color, line, composition, or content, like he did so many years ago over lunch. For the last 28 years, I've been teaching art at just about every level from pre-K to grad school to adult ed, and have done my best to pass on what I've learned from Leo's teaching methods and knowledge. His whole approach was such a magical blend, carefully prepared and loaded with profundities, scholarship, humor, techniques, psychology, and creative wisdom. At 97, Leo was still pushing that brush around like it was a new experience. He had so much to say about the world in his art. I'm now 78, still pushing the pencils and the brushes, and Leo inspires me every day to ignore the creaky bones and just keep going. Just the other day, I looked at his portrait and thought, hey Leo, you may be in another world, but you haven't gotten rid of me yet. I'll always be your grateful student.
I remember my last words to my mother. While she was on her deathbed 20 years ago, I said to her, don't worry, Mom, Ben and I will look after Dad. My mom opened her eyes, cocked herself up as best she could, smiled slightly, and said, yeah, he'll need it. But he thrived, my mom, I guess, was wrong. For a good part of those 20 years. When the shock wore off, he returned to painting. Initially, he was at his studio, and later, as his strength began to ebb, in his second-floor bedroom, and finally, when he could no longer do the stairs, in his first-floor living room. And he thrived socially, too. It turned out single men in their late 70s are popular with the ladies. He was mystified by this, but then I assured him that it was because he had a driver's license and a heartbeat. We never let it go to his head too much. It was during this time that he met Mitzi, who was his companion for the last 15 years of his life. We had many great meals together, and most memorably, she hosted our family for a week at a rental apartment in Paris in 2012. My dad loved to travel to Europe, and that was his final trip abroad. But he continued to travel domestically to see his cousin Paul Nadler conduct La Boheme at the University of Indiana in Bloomington, to exhibitions of his work in Springfield and Champaign, Illinois, to deliver a keynote address to the Colorado Art Teachers Association in Breckenridge, and to attend weddings of cousins, great nieces, and caregivers in New Rochelle, Brooklyn, Seattle, and Las Vegas. We often talk about my father's passion for art, and it was a passion, not love. But when he was young, he made the decision to pursue teaching and not art as his livelihood. He never wanted to be a starving artist. This allowed him to pursue his other passion and his true love, and that was my mother, Janice. Two of my strongest memories of my dad had nothing to do with his art. One was from when I was a 13-year-old chess player at Nichols Middle School in Evanston. I got the idea that we should send a team to the National Junior High Championships that was being held that year in New Haven, Connecticut. We organized a 25-hour chess marathon to raise money to make the trip. We didn't make enough money to fly, so I managed to convince my homeroom teacher, Mr. Poston, and my dad to drive 6 middle schoolers 900 miles to the tournament. I'm pretty sure this was the second most stressful event of my dad's life, superseded only by the student tour of England and France he co-led with his colleague Harry White. I'm sure Harry would be happy to regale you with stories of the trip, though oddly he told me earlier he did find the experience that stressful. I don't understand why. For the record, we finished 9th in the country. The other memory I'd like to share would have been even earlier than the New Haven trip. Maybe I was 8 or 10. My parents were having an argument or perhaps a heated discussion in the kitchen. I was in the adjacent family room and went into the kitchen to see what was going on. I remember sitting on the kitchen counter and asking what they were talking about. It was explained to me that they were concerned about my grandma Bessie, my dad's mother, and her ability to take care of herself. In my youthful naivete, I said, well, we have a lot of space. Why don't we ask Grandma to move in with us? And my dad, who was on the other side of the room, walked forcefully toward me in a way that scared me. He had never hit me and never would, but I thought at that moment I might have said something wrong and he was going to strike me. Instead, he grabbed me by my shoulders and kissed me on the head. I don't remember anything else about that moment, and of course I didn't understand its significance at the time. But looking back on it more than 50 years later, that event probably tells us most of what we need to know about my dad. The art, his students, the good meals, the ritual martinis, the travel, music, and theater, they were significant in mere details. Family was what mattered, and he would have thought of everyone here today as his family. So thank you all for being here, and in person and online, and for being part of our family. Story or anecdote? We're having open mic for a little while. So, anyone? Yep.
He mentioned the trip we went on.
Yeah.
We had speakers lined up at every museum. And when we got to the Jeu de Paume, the speaker wasn't there. So I went back to Leo and I said, Leo, we got no speaker. And he says, what do we do? I said, Leo, you're an artist. This is art. Talk about the art. And after all these canned lectures we went to, he gave the most marvelous discussions of all the works. And I remember the students who didn't follow us, the others went back to them, they were telling them, you just missed the price of the tour.
Thank you, Harry. Anyone else want to share? If not, we do have refreshments downstairs. Okay, we have a little more music.
The show that we mentioned, Hello Dolly, from the Sublime to the Surreal, was a musical review that I co-wrote with Michael Smith, the late Michael Smith. It was directed by Paul, who's here on the right. And this song was written because why not when you see Leo's work? Many people said Michael's song were like a painterly. And that gave us the idea for this show. And Leo gave us the idea for who among us was a master at that in the stories of Chicago. So once again, I bring you Hey Kid by Michael Smith, along with Nia, who at 9 years old was at the first performance sitting on the edge of the stage as a newsboy with a newsy cap singing along, honoring the boy Leo. And thank you for today and for your love.
The jukebox bars down deserted
knowledge of this community that we lost such a great artist this weekend, Tony Fitzpatrick. And please send your love to his family. He worked so hard to make sure Chicago was remembered, as did Leo. Thank you, Paul, and Ben, and Kara, Carolyn, and Dora.
Refreshments in the basement. I'm not exactly sure how you get there.